All right, Jesse, welcome to the breakdown. It's great to have you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Listen, I am so excited that after all of this chaos, you agreed to come and do a show entirely about late 1990s Magic the Gathering and not talk about crypto at all. I'm really excited for this. I think the listeners are going to appreciate it as well.
I'm here for it. I'm ready to talk about the Power Nine, Legends, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, whatever you want.
Oh man, I wish. No, so listen, it is really great to have you here. Obviously, this has been a really interesting, reflective moment for the crypto industry, for a lot of subparts of the crypto industry, for a lot of other orthogonal spaces, from TradFi to DC politics to philanthropy, that have been affected by this as well. And, one of the things that you have that most don't in this space is a really long duration historical perspective on it. You've lived through a lot of the crises that people thought were existential. And so maybe just to start there, how have what we've seen transpire in 2022 kind of compared to some of the challenges or moments that people thought were kind of existential crises in Bitcoin or crypto's past?
Yeah, well, this is the biggest blow up in crypto history for sure, in terms of the dollar amount and I think the number of people affected. Mt. Gox, when it blew up in 2014, it was about $400 million. And I think there are only about 20,000 something creditors that actually filed claims there. But that case is still ongoing. People have still yet to get their money back. So, that wound is still open. And this is definitely another major blow for the industry. Not so much because, FTX was critical infrastructure or anything. I think Mt. Gox was much more critical back in 2014 than FTX was today by a long shot. But politicians have been looking for an excuse to hassle us in the crypto industry, and unfortunately, here we are, the victims, and this blow up is somehow going to be pinned on us and be used as a lever to kind of squeeze more juice out of the crypto orange, unfortunately. And we're going to have to fight with everything we can to make sure that the narrative stays on point, which is that FTX was a scam, a Ponzi. Not unlike Bernie Madoff, not unlike Theranos, and just like Bernie Madoff was not an indictment of the stock market or equities, and Theranos was not an indictment of the medical profession. FTX is not an indictment of crypto whatsoever. We just happen to be the victims in this case. He could have used anything, and I hope that we all stay on message with that and make sure that this doesn't get used as an excuse to shut us down.
The one optimistic thing about that is this is a case where this isn't sort of like effective post-PR spin where you need a bunch of consultants to tell you what to say. It's just the actual truth. The question is whether the actual truth will be able to rise above what is an extremely convenient sort of, priors confirming sort of moment for a lot of people who already didn't like the space.
For sure. Yeah, it's going to be spun that way. I think There have fortunately been a few mainstream media articles already kind of elucidating the fact that this was a Ponzi scheme and it wasn't really a crypto thing. I hope we'll see more of that. I hope that people don't lose sight of all the great things that crypto is here to do. I think when the market's up and down, people are focused on the speculation use case, but really the whole reason this movement got started was for all the great good that it could do for the world. And, this should be something that politicians really want to embrace as, part of their platform. And, for all of us to rally around is something that we can really do. It's really, once in maybe, far more than once in a lifetime shot to really do something great for the world. On the scale of what the internet has done for information, we can do that for money and free people from this like slave money that we have and separate money and state. Bring about a new era of human flourishing, and that's a war worth fighting, and we shouldn't back down from it.
So one of the things that's always been super interesting about you and about Kraken is you've never been sort of like the rebel rouser from outside the system throwing stones at TradFi or anything. You've been willing to participate in that system to try to kind of play by its rules as long as you're kind of advancing what you wanted to advance. And I'm thinking specifically about things like, the SPDR, and the sort of trying to kind of get that bank charter and things like that. But at the same time, I've always had the perception that you, at least personally, certainly had a wariness born from experience of how cozy close to get with sort of the existing players, the existing establishment. And I think, I don't know how much your experience in New York was a part of that, or, but how have you kind of in any organization tried to navigate that line?
Yeah, it's a tough line. You want to work with regulators and lawmakers to the extent that they are supportive, and they want to, if they're just seeking to kind of build some guardrails and make sure that everything's safe and cool, then that's great. If they're trying to shut down the industry, and that's, I think, what we saw in New York and what we've seen in several geos around the world, where they come up with this new legislation and they install something that looks very authoritarian, that removes a lot of choice and a lot of options for people. I mean, the people of New York have probably missed out on billions of dollars of wealth creation over the last decade because of the BIT license. While Losky walked out of there and started a consulting firm to help people get the very license that he created. So, I mean, it's a total racket, and that's not the kind of the lawmaking that we want to work with, which is this cronyism. So, we're happy to work with regulators where they really have the best interest of people at heart, where they're really looking out for consumers, where they care about the people who are not served by the banks, and they want to provide that rail of last resort for people. We're happy to work with them all day long. We're happy to get every license under the sun to be fully supervised in every jurisdiction. If that means that we're better able to bring Bitcoin and crypto to the world and help more people get across that bridge and onboarded to the world of crypto, where hopefully, with a little more education and a little more time, people will not need centralized venues anymore, and they'll move into the complete world of DeFi and non-custodial services, where they can do whatever they want without a middleman, and they can stop paying those fees. They can stop worrying about getting robbed. They can stop worrying about the FTXs of the world stealing their money when they're supposed to be safekeeping it. These problems that exist in TradFi that are exemplified by FTX are solved by crypto, and so, the FTX blow up, if anything, is an indictment of centralized finance, this model of no transparency, this black box, this centralized custody system. Contrast that with blockchain and Bitcoin, where you have full transparency in everything that's there. You can see something the second it moves. People control their own keys and their own coins. Someone can't move your coins for you. Someone can't misappropriate your funds for you. There's not a middleman there to steal from you. So, if anything, I think this whole case just kind of highlights maybe the need for more supervision of centralized exchanges around the world, and maybe more support of DeFi to help people get across and get into DeFi where these problems don't exist.
Well, this is one of the things that I think that the people are most worried about in terms of the Washington response, right? It's clearly the failure of a centralized institution. And even more specific to that, the failure of opaque leadership and accounting practices within a centralized institution. And yet it seems highly likely that the blast radius is going to include the exact types of things that actually provide a sort of technological solution to a lot of the problems of that opacity and that sort of centralization. It seems more likely that we'll see a reconstruction of the TradFi system in terms of massive fragmentation of every different kind of part of the system being controlled by some other intermediary, in an endless chain, so that, all of a sudden crypto transactions have to go through 6 different parties as well. I guess two kind of questions, and I'll start with one because they're very kind of different. As a centralized exchange, it seems like you kind of understand there's a a necessity to the role that those sort of centralized institutions play, both in terms of onboarding and getting people comfortable, and likely forever with a certain type of customer who, just doesn't want sort of the responsibility or of the obligation. But within that framework, especially kind of building off of what you said about DeFi, how do you view kind of Kraken's role as being that bridge, as helping people sort of like kind of get deeper into the opportunities they have that aren't just at Kraken? Because certainly from a standard kind of business practice perspective, you would think the opposite, and kind of what we saw with SAM and DeFi legislation, where you want to use tools to capture people once they're there. And it seems like you have kind of the opposite attitude. So what does that look like in practice for an exchange like Kraken?
Yeah, well, I think just, philosophically, I came into the space with I think a very different mindset than Sam. He clearly saw crypto as a means to an end, that being to make a bunch of money in order to donate that to some other cause that he felt was worthy. I personally got into the space because I think crypto and Bitcoin are that end. They are that ultimate good that we can do for the world. And, everything else is sort of running Kraken. It's not a fun job, to be honest. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of BS. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of dealing with people that, are unsavory characters. And, I do it because of my passion for bringing Bitcoin to the world. I feel like that's a tremendous good that we can do with Kraken. And I think that goes, for some of the other centralized players as well. And, like you said, I think these venues are going to continue to exist for a long time to come because, first of all, we've got the vast majority of the world still doesn't own any crypto. We got to fix that. And those people are generally not coming in already having crypto that they earned from their job or something like that. They are coming in with fiat currencies. And so we got to help them either, trade their fiat currencies for crypto. We got to help them earn Bitcoin, at their jobs. We got to help them transact in Bitcoin. So we got to make it easier to use, and we got to help improve the use cases, and we got to spread awareness and education. I think that's something that, a profit motivated centralized business, can do really, right? We have a profit incentive to go out and educate people and onboard people to the ecosystem, and we get paid for that. So, I think our interests are well aligned with that of the Bitcoin movement. And I think some people think that DeFi is somehow competitive with the centralized exchanges. I mean, I think there's a problem of like long-termism in general, is that, we're thinking about battles that are like 100 years down the road, when all of us are gone. I'm thinking about, how do I just deliver Bitcoin in DeFi to the world? And if DeFi ends up eating Kraken's lunch 50 years from now, fine, great. I'll die a happy man, because, that was the mission in the end. And so I think that we can't be worried about that. I mean, that has to be the objective. The objective can't be, we just came to recreate PayPal and make as much money as possible. So, I do think people will continue to use centralized exchanges, even, probably even 50 years from now, maybe, hopefully not. But, there might always be that person who just, for whatever reason, wants to trust somebody else with their stuff. And, I could be stuffing all my cash under my mattress, or in my attic or in my basement, but I choose to use a bank, even though I have that option, because of convenience. And, maybe that'll be the case for centralized crypto exchanges, 50 years from now. Maybe there'll still be some stuff that we can do that's useful. But we're also working on DeFi stuff. We want to expose people more to that. We've got a non-custodial wallet in development. We've got an NFT marketplace that'll be launching soon. So we're hoping to also expose people to more DeFi stuff through the centralized platform that we have, through an easy user interface. And when people are ready, they realize the power of it and what they can do with DeFi through the simple interface that Kraken offers. And when they're ready, they can just go do it themselves. That's the beauty of DeFi, is like, you don't really need Kraken to participate in parachain auctions or to stake your coins or to trade. You can use a DEX. And so, we kind of think about it like we're here to help people kind of get halfway across the bridge, and get comfortable. And when they're ready, they can take the next step all the way off to the other side. the promised land of DeFi.
I mean, listen, I think you part of, I mean, the rub of it is right what you said right at the beginning, that for you, there is not a separation between the mission and the business activities, as there clearly was in this other case, right? And so what behaviors that leads you towards are just naturally different. And I think that that's particularly important in this case. And I actually want to kind of bridge off into the philosophical for a moment, because, it has felt like a big part of what has been revealed kind of post FTX crash is almost the opposite of what you just said, where everything was ends justify the means. And this sort of, we were talking about this a little bit before the we were recording, but this sort of freshman seminar style philosophy of, I have this thing that I'm trying to do, and I've learned just enough to realize that all the rules are bullshit and don't apply to me. And if other people don't kind of get that that's the game that we're all really playing, that's on them. And it's just sort of, it feels like it's being proven clearly untrue in this moment. But, I know that you've thought a lot about sort of the philosophical perspective on what we've learned right now. And, are there any key takeaways, I guess, as you've been reflecting, not just on FTX, but kind of where the space has come to in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think effective altruism's reputation is totally on fire right now. Maybe with good reason. I feel like, I don't know if you ever train like jujitsu or, martial arts, but, they say that the white belts are the most dangerous to train with, because they just they use all their power. They know a few moves. They go crazy. They're not controlled. And, I kind of feel like that was maybe how Sam was as well. You don't want to just take one philosophy class and then make up your mind about the whole world, and I kind of feel like he had a kind of a very superficial, naive understanding of, ethics. And, I think utilitarianism, which effective altruism mostly is largely debunked, I think. I mean, at least from my perspective, as something that's justifiable, right? I mean, this is like the classic, guy walks into a hospital and the doctor has to decide if he's going to harvest all this dude's organs, this healthy man, to save 5 other patients that need transplants. And, the utilitarian would say, yeah, of course, you're going to sacrifice that healthy guy to save 5 lives. I think this is just very dangerous. There's very dangerous thinking there that can lead to all sorts of horrible consequences and atrocities. And, I think it's always interesting, I think, just from a history of philosophy perspective. I mean, you see the guys that are committing, mass murders and holocausts and the most horrible things are all they're true believers. They're very ideologically driven by something that is just fundamentally flawed for some reason. And they use that to justify anything, murdering millions of people because it's going to create some better world for whatever the billions of people that are going to exist after that. So I think that kind of super long-termism, where we're just going to commit any atrocities now because of some thing that, some imaginary world that's going to come after that, I think is just a horrible approach to life and to doing things, because you just don't know what's going to happen along the way. And also, my personal philosophy is that, there's not you can't really quantify, one criticism of effective altruism is that basically, you can somehow quantify happiness or the value of a human or something like that. And that it's basically just a numbers game, and it boils down to this math problems, sacrifice 1 million people now to make 2 million people happy later. And, I don't think you can really compare like that. I think it's all totally apples and oranges, and everyone's different. And when you make value judgments for people oh, this money, I can do more good with this money than you can do with it. We even saw that actually one of the articles about someone who had received some grant money from Sam said, we're not going to return the grant money because it wouldn't be fair to fire the employees that we hired with the grant money. So, I mean, those guys are making the judgment that it's better to keep those employees than it is to return the money to the people that it's been stolen from. And who knows what they were going to do with it, right? They might have been using that money to like pay for their cancer treatment or something. Like, you just don't know. So, anyway, I'm like going down like a crazy rabbit hole and rambling now, but
I think it's important. And just so that kind of the listeners understand why I, particularly wanted to talk with you about this is I actually do think that this is not just the Shit on Sam and FTX show. And certainly, like, although I have been, had a front row seat to this and have talked extensively about it, I'm not setting out to sort of be like the voice of anti that or anything. I do, however, believe it is incredibly important to discuss this dimension, which is not going to be a part of the New York Times articles or the Wall Street Journal articles or anything else, which is the philosophical underpinnings that made this seem reasonable. Because, as this, listen, if this industry kind of rises back from the ashes as it has so many times and people acquire and accumulate wealth and influence again, there will be decisions made about how to deploy that wealth and influence. And taking the time to actually dig into how this particular philosophy has proven itself to be extraordinarily problematic, either sort of the genesis from which this fraud was, justified, or just a convenient way to justify it, sort of after the fact, either is a pretty terrible indictment of it. And so, again, it's not to rag on people who are excited about effective altruism, although it's, it's a conversation that we're having. It's more just that it's a part of the conversation that we need to have, right?
Yeah, I wonder how much we can hold effective altruism accountable for this, because, clearly, I mean, the stated objective is to do max good, basically, right? And Sam just basically, did $10 billion of damage to 1 million people, if not more, if you count the broader crypto ecosystem, kind of the brand damage and the cleanup cost that he's created, is just tremendous. So he certainly failed at helping people. But so, I don't know how much we can hold them accountable. Like, is he a true effective altruist, or do we have to hold veganism accountable here as well? Because, he's also a vegan and just happens to also be a scammer.
I think that's a super reasonable question. And my guess is that a lot of people in the effective altruism movement are very comfortable engaging deeply with the sort of complicated questions that you bring up, that we're never really a part of. We're sitting here understanding that Sam used this space that we care about, so it's not at all inconceivable that he did the same thing for, with his other thing, right? I think actually something that you said that I've, at the risk of going too far down the rabbit hole of trying to psychoanalyze someone, the idea that he could spend people's money better than them seems to have been at the heart of a lot of this in multiple dimensions. And that is a personal assessment, right? That doesn't come from a wellspring of a philosophical movement. That comes from a certain arrogance that is entirely personal, whatever else gets wrapped around it ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only speculate as to how much his philosophy actually played into his actions. But we have those text messages that he shared with the reporter, where he basically says, I basically did whatever I thought was going to get me what I wanted in the moment, and none of it was real. And, I'm just sort of like playing this character to get what I want. So, my question is like, all right, well, were you lying then or are you lying now? And like, who's the real Sam Bankman-Fried?
I don't think we're going to know that. I think it's an important discussion, but while I have you, I want to shift it now a little bit and look forward. As we head into 2023, we were obviously doing a lot of reevaluating, returning to fundamentals, getting back to basics. What do you think as an industry are some of the most important steps forward? And that can be on kind of multiple dimensions. It could be in terms of how we think about ourselves. It can be in terms of how we kind of define our objectives. It could be about how we engage with lawmakers, But what do you think are some of the most important next steps?
Well, I think we really got to ramp up our lobbying effort and get even more engaged in DC and with the lawmakers around the world who are, surely feeling like they need to do something right now. We've already gotten a ton of inquiries. I think everybody is feeling like they need to be seen to be doing something now. Even if they don't know what it is, they know they should be sending out questionnaires to all the exchanges or whatever, whatever's within their power to do, they're trying to do. So we have a ton of work to do there. Fortunately, we do have some very good, longstanding actors in the space who I think are, good representatives of the industry, who I think, can speak intelligently and show that, it's not all bad actors here. And, it's certainly not crypto's problem that there are bad actors. So that for sure, we got to get on top of, and I think we have to be fully aligned and on the same team, as the broader crypto industry. There's been some infighting in DC between various coins trying to throw each other under the bus, to try to gain favor, or they feel like it's a zero-sum game where, if Bitcoin dies, then proof of stake wins, and therefore their coin's going to win and stuff like that. And, I think at least in the short term, we can't be fighting those types of fights, which I think are just a sideshow. And, when they come in to wreck us, we're just going to get slaughtered for fighting amongst each other. So I think we gotta solve that. I think the industry can do better at vetting out these bad actors. And, I think that can start with like the ratings sites, the ranking sites, who historically just sort of like rank on volume numbers, which FTX also heavily gamed, like super inflated numbers to get to the top of the rankings. We should start looking at other fundamentals of these businesses. How long have they been around? What licenses do they hold? What is the experience level of their executive team? Have they undergone a proof of reserves audit? Have they undergone any other kind of audits, SOC 2 or anything else, that would show that they actually have something beneath the surface, I mean, Kraken and I probably speak for the other large exchanges as well that have been around for a while. It was like, the business is like an iceberg. I mean, you go to the website and, it looks like a fairly simple website, but what's happening behind the scenes is like tremendous. There's just a ton of infrastructure that's there to custody the funds, to reconcile everything, to do the accounting systems, to make sure, we're not getting hacked, to make sure we can file our taxes. All of that stuff, seemed to have been missing at FTX. And so if you're just looking at the surface, like apparently a bunch of VCs did, the businesses might not look that different. But you really need somebody who has that access and who knows what to look for to do that analysis, to ask those questions, and to develop some kind of scoring system that people can look at who aren't that informed, to make some kind of decision about, when a new exchange emerges 6 weeks from now, and suddenly acquires $10 billion in client deposits, that people have some questions to ask, or, they have a score of an F, on the ranking site. I think we can do better at that kind of stuff, because there were a ton of red flags with FTX, and there've been red flags with other venues in the past as well. And, I think that, for whatever reason, people ignore those flags, and then they forget that, these trading venues aren't just for trading. They're also doubling as your custodian. And, no matter how much money you make trading, if you lose everything you've got deposited there, you're probably still quite a bit down in the end. So, I think thinking about these guys as custodians first and foremost, would help a lot of people to not risk so much in one place.
What makes you, sort of looking out over the next phase, however long it lasts, the most optimistic? And that can be on a micro level in terms of things that you guys are doing at Kraken. It can be on a macro level in terms of changes you see sort of observing, or it can be both.
Well, the good thing about this hack with FTX is that I think the rest of the industry didn't really miss a beat. I mean, obviously we've got all this tremendous amount of contagion with the lenders, but the other exchanges just kept on running, no problems. It's not like we lost anything that was like critically important to price discovery or to facilitating trades or transactions. So that's great. I mean, we're in a completely different place than we were, when Gox went down in 2014. So that's fantastic. I think more people are coming into crypto than ever through stuff that I would not have predicted, like NFTs, which I think are, really, I think we need to find more things like that, which are sort of this like gateway use case for people, who ask like, why would I need Ethereum? What am I going to do with it? Well, if, now the Reddit collectible avatars have been a massive success, and they've onboarded millions of people into crypto just through the avatar system. People want to trade and customize these avatars, which are also NFTs. So I'm excited about stuff like that. NFTs in general, I think there are a lot of like real world use cases for NFTs that are really like tangible and practical. Ticket sales for concerts, for example, and the secondary markets for those. NFTs, I think, can hugely improve that pretty easily. And, that could be like another major gateway where, if it's now suddenly like, Ticketmaster starts using NFTs for everything, or there's a competitor to Ticketmaster that's using NFTs, that could be another huge onboarding event for us. So I think, besides just telling people, in the developed world, like in the States, we have tons of financial services available to us. And I think the use case for Bitcoin specifically, it makes sense that people focus on the speculation use case because most adults in the US, have access to bank accounts, but it's obviously not the same all over the world. And the actual functional use case of Bitcoin for payments and a store of value and a hedge against inflation and all that is much more pronounced internationally. So I think that the NFTs, I feel like, have a lot of potential to really like penetrate the US in a way that just speculating on Bitcoin as another asset inside your brokerage account, hasn't really been able to do. So I'm really excited about NFTs. I hope that we get to see more of those use cases emerge, which I think will sort of be the back door to onboarding the next billion people.
Yeah, it must be at least a little bit full circle for you watching sort of the rise of NFTs, given some of the things that you were working on, 20 years ago now.
Yeah. Prior to this business, I had a company selling virtual items and currencies for online games like World of Warcraft Gold. And I was a Magic player before that, and Pokemon trader. I had a small e-commerce business selling Magic and Pokemon cards back in the day as well. I've been in the collectibles and digital goods world for more than 2 decades now. It's really interesting to see it come back around. I also had an art gallery for a while. So it's weird how all these things just come back together in NFTs now. And, I think there's just so much potential for all that stuff, these collectibles. There's constantly these problems with Magic cards. Any card that's worth $10,000 plus, you have to worry about fakes, and you got to send the thing off to get authenticated. You can't really do these trades. People are getting scammed all the time with just amazingly good fakes. So NFTs solve that problem, and even if not fully tokenized, you can sort of have the proof of authenticity that goes along with the card itself, that you can transfer. So I think there's just so many great use cases. And, back in the day, part of what got me into Bitcoin was that, I knew that people were trading items in World of Warcraft, for real world money. That was part of the business, and kids who were too young to have a bank account had their World of Warcraft account, where they had their gold, their virtual gold, and they had their virtual items that were basically like their stores of wealth. And that was they had all of their net worth tied up in their World of Warcraft account, when they're 12 years old. And some of these accounts were worth thousands of dollars. And, these kids were using that stuff, and because they didn't have a PayPal account, they couldn't get a bank account. They needed some way to pay for things digitally. And so, I knew from that this was going to be the future, and we just kind of needed that generation to grow up and, demand that. And I think they are now. And, it's just, just thinking back 10 years ago where we were with Bitcoin, you go to a meetup and there'd be 20 people there. And these days, you get these conferences with 5,000 plus people. It's just, insane, and there's like one every week. So that's really heartening. It's really amazing how big the space has grown. And it's super cool to see all the amazing stuff that people are working on.
At the beginning of the show, you called whatever we have to do next a fight worth having, and I think that's dead on. It's the right attitude for what's coming next. Jesse, it was awesome to have you on the show. Excited to do this again. Excited for you to continue to provide leadership in this space, and appreciate you hanging out.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.